Welcome, you good people, to the Daily Objective. I'm Robert Nasir. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Amy Nasir, and we are honored to be part of the Daily Objective today. We usually have the afternoon show, but we need to talk about Casablanca, which means we need an expert. We need Dr. Sotirakopoulos. Nikos is here to talk to us about this film. You know, Roger Ebert said, this film is about a man and a woman who are in love and who sacrifice love for a higher purpose. And he goes on to explain why he finds that immensely appealing. I take issue with that, but he's not entirely wrong. So, Nikos, what do you think? What's on your mind when you think of Casablanca? We've talked about this film before. I know you have a lot of thoughts about Casablanca, which I think is one of the greatest films ever made.
I think it's, if you ask me what's the best film ever, I will say Casablanca. Now, I'm not an expert. I cannot analyze a film as a cinema expert. I can only analyze it as someone who values the themes of the film, who has watched the film many times, who has had in different parts of my life. So when I was a leftist, I liked the film. When I've been in love, I like the film. When I've been heartbroken, I like the film. It's impossible not to like the film in any context. So, but before we get to the deep question, and the biggest question is the grand finale of the film, and the question you, Robert, raised, which is whether at the end there is an act of sacrifice to a higher cause committed. For people who maybe don't remember it or who don't know, I'll just give the very, very general overview of what's happening in the film. So we are in the middle of the Second World War, and we find ourselves in Casablanca in Morocco. And it is, in a way, a proxy front of the war where there is no war, however. So someone who has run away from the Nazis can be relatively free there, but there are spies. It's the colonial time, so it's under the French, let's say, authorities, which is not the same as the Vichy regime, but it's at the same time not part of the Allies. So Casablanca is neutral, but there's a lot of politics going on. And why is it so crucial? Because from Casablanca, people can take the airplane to Portugal, and then from Portugal to the United States. So people who want to escape the hell of the Second World War, Casablanca is this place of hope. What would say today, it's a green list country. From Casablanca, there is the hope that you can escape. So amidst this historical context, we find Rick, who is an American who has fought or who has supported the cause of the anti-colonial cause in Ethiopia, and who has supported the Democrat side in the Spanish Civil War, now finding himself bitter and alone in Casablanca, running a business, running a cafe. And he's introduced to us being, he literally sits alone and plays chess with himself. He doesn't want to drink with any of the patrons. And whoever brings up, oh, you need to do some good things, he says, no, I don't stick my neck out for anyone. I'm done with politics. I'm only here for myself. And within this context, we find out that a big leader of the resistance in Europe, Victor Laszlo, reaches Casablanca with his wife. His wife happens to be Rick's biggest love, and the reason why Rick is so embittered. And they need Rick because Rick has 2 passes for Portugal, and they're in a way in his mercy. And the question is, will Rick going to give them the passes or not? So this is the general context. And let me start the discussion with this and throw the ball to you. One of the things that I like in the film anyway is the aesthetics of it. Everyone looks good. And Rick, what a performance by Humphrey Bogart. And also what a performance by Ingrid Bergman, Ilsa. That scene when she enters the cafe, I think she's the femme fatale to end all other femme fatales. She has exactly what the femme fatale needs. She's not in today's term this sex bomb, but she has this beauty. She has this magnetism. You know, you see her and you say, okay, this is a wife. This is a woman that has put her marks in some man's life. So that's the context of the film. So now throwing the ball back to you.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Ilsa, so brilliantly played by Ingrid Bergman. I found that if I was going to pick a weak point in the film or something that I might want to change, Ebert, one of the things he gets right, Roger Ebert says, Ilse Lund's role is basically that of a lover and a helpmate to a great man. And in that sense, I found her to be the perfect Ayn Rand woman, but not the perfect Ayn Rand heroine. She fits perfectly Ayn Rand's definition of femininity. Yeah. She is exactly what a woman needs to be for a man. But in Ayn Rand's stories, that plays out as a great woman who also has that ability to be that perfect lover and helpmate. So I kind of wish that Ilse had a role with more of a role. But that said, you're right. It's played to perfection. You can see why both men are in love with her, why she is in love with Rick. And although she loves Laszlo, there's a question, is she in love with him? And that gets to the end of the film, which we won't jump to. But yes, thinking of Ilse, that was my first thought. She's not that important. The thing about this film for me is, among being one of the great love stories, it's primarily a redemption story. I think of the scene at the beginning of the film where Major Strasser says to Rick, "What is your nationality?" Really he's asking, what are your alliances? Where's your loyalty?
I'm an alcoholic.
I'm a drunkard. And Louis says, "Oh, that makes Rick a citizen of the world." He has given up the fight. Rick has given up the fight, but he remains in every scene. It just oozes out of him. He is a strong, competent man. He's a man who makes things happen. He gets things done. He is efficacious. He avowedly rejects all of his principles. As you say, I stick my neck out for nobody. But he nonetheless lives by his code of values. And consequently, he's successful. He runs one of the two successful, drinking establishments, which is an important establishment in Casablanca. And he's surrounded by employees and friends who love him, who revere him. They're loyal to him. He is a man of enormous character, even though he's explicitly given up his avowed principles. So that's why, to me, Casablanca is even more a redemption story. And it's my favorite kind of redemption story, not of a man who went bad, but of a man who lost his way and finds himself again. My favorite redemption stories aren't the ones where somebody does some horrible thing and then they're redeemed, but somebody to whom horrible things happened and he finds himself again. And that's what I see in this movie.
And notice, sorry.
Thank you, Nico. So yeah, you mentioned femme fatale in terms of Ilse. I don't see her quite as a femme fatale, as a, she does come out with a gun at one point in the movie. And there is a lot of film noir in this movie, a lot of those elements in the direction and the way that the lighting is. And it's really a beautiful movie on those grounds, just aesthetically. They had to do it in black and white, of course, and they did everything right. And just the glimmer in people's eyes, the tears.
You're right. She's not a femme fatale in the noir cinema sense.
Right.
She's simply a femme fatale in that she is the fatal weakness of all the men in the film.
Mm. Yeah.
That's how so again, I'm not an expert in cinema, so Amy is right. She's not the film noir femme fatale, but when I say femme fatale, it's the woman who puts a mark in your life. And again, you will see, okay, I mean, that's not a statistic, but usually if you ask me, what was the woman that put a mark in your life? It's not the one which is obviously, the one which is the sex bomb, as we'd say in the 90s. No, it's the Ilse type of woman. And you mentioned something important, Robert. I think Rick's Cafe is also a character in the film because it's a place where everyone is anxious about something. They are nervous. Am I going to get the ticket? You see tragedies there. You see hope there. But it brings people to life with music, with jazz. I think also Sam and his jazz is also nice. So you have this place and you can find, even amidst the agony of the war and the agony of am I going to escape, you see this place getting alive with jazz. And I also want to get to the scene with La Marseillaise when with the French national anthem, because I think it's an iconic scene. So what is the thing that takes Rick out of his, let's say, how to put it, out of his, you mentioned redemption, out of his downfall? So when he sees Ilsa, his downfall meets a Nasir. He gets drunk, she comes back to him, and he's drunk, bitter. He's kind of a loser, I would say.
Yes. But there's go ahead.
Go on.
I was going to say there is a scene that, for me, it really wakes him up. It sparks that latent virtue that's in him. And that's this whole little side plot with Anina, the wife of Jan Brandel, the roulette player.
Yes, from Bulgaria.
It turns out they don't have enough money to buy a visa, to bribe somebody to a visa. But if they go through Louis, if they go through Captain Renault, they're going to be able to do this. And so she, the wife, goes to meet Captain Renault at the police station. He asks her, meet me in my private office and we'll talk about this, and makes clear to her that in some manner she is going to sacrifice her virtue, as it were. And when Rick finds out about this, he can't stand it. He intervenes, and he does it so gracefully and smooth. Her husband's at the roulette table playing, and you don't have the impression that it's a corrupt gambling joint, but we know that Rick makes it possible for Captain Renault to win, so the table's rigged in some way.
Yep.
And he steers Jan into winning the money needed to buy the visas without compromising her. And that's just one of the places where you see this is a deeply, not just good man and a good-hearted man, but it's also a man in command of the situation. He's not going to let this go that way. And, you mentioned what reawakens his virtue. I think that sequence was an important part of that.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just say something about Anina? She is extremely, I find her to be very courageous, and going up to Rick, the owner of Cafe American. She knows that he knows Renault. And she says, can I trust Renault? And she doesn't even have to say, Renault wants me to sleep with him so that he can give us letters of transit or transport. And she says this, she says, as a man, what do you think if I continue my marriage and keep this dark secret buried in my heart forever? How, do you think that would be okay?
And Rick can't stand it. And the one thing I have to say about that too, the casting on that, Joy Page, who incidentally was Jack Warner's stepdaughter, instead of casting a beautiful woman who, your heart would go out to naturally. No, she's an attractive woman, but she's not an especially good looking woman. She's just a woman, a good woman. And again, Rick can't stand to see what he knows is going to happen.
Yeah. So it's just beautiful. It's so beautiful that Carl, the head waiter, the one, stocky gentleman, there's that scene right after he gives the winnings to her husband, who's at the gambling table, how Carl, the head waiter, reacts to that. I mean, you can just see he's just melting, and he loves it, and he loves Rick, and you can see his loyalty to Rick, there's just a little tiny part there. Rick comes up to the bar. Carl's behind the bar, and Carl he's basically going to tell him what a wonderful person Rick is to Rick.
Rick won't let him.
Rick won't let him.
We'll have none of that.
But it's just so endearing and so lovely. Just amazing.
And the solidarity and internationalism. So there's a universalism in Rick's Cafe. So we have Sam, who is a black musician. We have the guy from Soviet Union who is behind the bar. We had, as you said, that person who then we find out he's also in the resistance. And I think Rick's Cafe is this idea of universalism, and that's the role of the music. And also there's something, that scene reminds us of Kira in We the Living, where she has to take this decision. Do I put aside, do I sleep with someone to help the man I really love? And there's a very Howard Rourke like moment with Rick when he talks in the beginning with this guy who has the passes to Portugal, this kind of not heroic figure, this I don't know how to call him, this weird guy. And the guy asks something like, oh, you despise me, don't you? And Rick replies, if I gave you any thought, I would despise you. So that's a bit like a hard rock line.
Yeah. Oh, but Peter Lorre is so good at being despicable, and yet he's so good in that role. Yeah, Senor Ugarte.
I like him as well. I think I've seen him in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Jules Verne's adaptation by Disney. Okay, so, but I think this transformation, when Rick helps the couple, I don't think this is what triggers the transformation. I think what triggers the transformation is he sees Ilsa and he remembers who he was. And with Ilsa, he remembers Spain, he remembers Ethiopia, and he admires Victor Laszlo, the husband of Ilsa. He admires him. It's important. He admits that he knows him. And seeing this thing reminds him, I'm better than this. I'm better. Why am I against myself? So he says again and again, at some point he says, I'm only fighting for myself. I'm the only one I'm interested in. And I claim that all his virtuous life is in accordance to that. He's a selfish man, the way we objectivists call it. And that's why he wanted to fight in Spain. Now, it's questionable whether the communists winning in Spain would be so good, but let's say he was with the Democrats, not with although the Spanish Civil War, anyway, that's too complicated to think. But within that context, he was with a good side. And it makes sense to say, I don't want fascism to win in the world. It makes sense to say, I don't want Mussolini to start expanding in Africa when he helped the Ethiopians. Of course, he said they paid well. So he said, okay, I didn't sacrifice. So I think he is something close to what would be a Randian figure. Now let's get to the climax, which is that Ilsa goes back to him the second night, explains to him what happened. She explains to him that when she was with him in Paris, when they had their short-lived love affair, she thought that her husband was dead because he was in a concentration camp, and word spread out that he was dead. And then when she's about to escape with Rick, she finds out that he's not dead. So what a struggle inside Ilsa. Here's the man who has taught her everything. Here's the man she admires. And as she said, she thought she's in love with him because she only found out what love really means, being in love, when she met Rick. So Ilsa now has to decide, that man my husband needs me, the husband who I thought dead, and I have to leave Rick. But of course, Rick is still always in her thought, and she's always in Rick's thought. There's this beautiful scene when Rick is half drunk and he says, from all the, how does he call it? From all the gin joints in the world, from all the towns in the world, he enters into my cafe. So so beautiful. Anyway, so probably they have a night of love making. We don't know, because there's this change in the scene. So we don't know what happened. We know they kissed, but then we don't know what happened. Of course, it was time that you couldn't show that on cinema, but we assume they had the night of passion. And Rick leaves here with the understanding that we're going to have Victor escape, one ticket, and me and you are going to stay here. And Rick makes the arrangement that when they go to the airport, it's like, oh, surprise, you're getting also in the airplane. You're living with him. And here is a big question. Is Rick committing a sacrifice? He's giving up for a second time the love of his life, the biggest love of his life, the woman that rocked his world and has been in his heart forever. I mean, not forever, for like 3 years, but 4 years, but he never forgot her. And he's doing this because he wants to support Laszlo. He wants to support the resistance. And he thinks that also for Ilsa, the best idea is to go with Victor Laszlo. So my question to you, Amy and Robert, is Rick committing a sacrifice? And is Ilsa committing a sacrifice going with... and the director wants us to think that this is the case, because there's the line, well, the craziness in the world is more important than the lives of the private matters of three people, something like that. But do you think that's a sacrifice?
I'm going to make my case on that, but I know we've got some great super chats. If we could just pause for a second.
Yeah, let's pause because this is the climax.
Yes.
Yes. And thank you for the lovely summation that you're giving us about the plot. For that, that's really great. Thank you.
So Scott comes in at $5 and says, when Rick barks at Sam, I thought I told you never to play, and then he sees Ilsa, is one of the best moments in movie history. Scott, I agree with you. That is, and it just sticks with you. Mary Aline is in for $3 as well. Thank you for that. Bonnie says at $3, almost beat Mary Aline. I love it when we get the super chat competition going on. Mary Aline says, Amy looks especially lovely today. You know,
thank you, Mary Aline.
She's got the curls.
You know,
going.
I have a little bit of a 1940s inspiration, sort of, kind of, that I could, whip up in 10 minutes. So, and
as always, there's other good comments in the chat too. But this is controversial. One of the reasons why this film makes sense to me and why I don't see it as an issue of self-sacrifice, or at least not a simple issue of self-sacrifice, it's the same way I analyze politics. One of the things I've noticed about politics is that everything that happens in Washington, D.C., and I'm guessing the same thing is true around the world, is that everything makes more sense if you assume everybody actually means what they say. I mean, we know people lie. We know there's all sorts of back plots and stories, and not everybody's honest all the time. But if you at least start with what people say, it turns out it all makes sense. There's no confusion. Why do they do this? If they actually believe the thing? Anyway,
yeah,
I find that's true here too. I'll go to the closing sequence, but I'm going to start with Laszlo talking to Rick.
Yes.
And Laszlo says, you know how you sound, Monsieur Blaine? Like a man who's trying to convince himself of something he doesn't believe in his heart. Each of us has a destiny for good or for evil. Rick says, yeah, I get the point. And Laszlo says, I wonder if you do. I wonder if you know that you're trying to escape from yourself and that you'll never succeed.
Yes.
Rick says, you seem to know all about my destiny. Laszlo answers, I know a good deal more about you than you suspect. I know, for instance, that you are in love with a woman. It is perhaps strange that we should be in love with the same woman. And he goes on and on. Everything he says hits 100%.
Yeah.
And that's part of the plot. That's part of what happens.
Yes.
One of the things that happens at the end of the film, people will tell me, oh, Rick's just saying that. What he says, I'm going to jump to that sequence that you want to get to. Rick says, out on the tarmac, you've got to listen to me. Ilsa's saying, I don't want to listen to you. You've got to listen to me. Do you have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up in a concentration camp. Isn't that true, Louis? And Louis Renault says, I'm afraid Major Strasser would insist. Ilsa's, you're saying this only to make me go. And Rick answers, I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and for the rest of your life. And then later in the same conversation, I've got a job to do too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of.
These last words, I never really got them. What does he have to do?
He is going to rejoin the fight. He's going to stop running a club and he's going to go back to becoming a freedom fighter. He's going to start fighting for his ideals again.
Yeah, but also Victor is doing this. So again, I think Ilsa has a point that basically he's trying to.
But Victor's going back to America. And Victor says he's going to continue his fight from America, where he will be safe. And that's not what Rick's going to be doing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Again, it's easy to do the same thing. You'll say, oh, you're only saying this to make me go. We think, oh, he's only saying that because it's the plot. It elevates the plot. If you look through the previous parts of the script, there's so much that supports that. I don't think it's just the script writers throwing us non-altruists a bone. I think it actually makes sense. that Rick stays behind. Now, that said, again, I go back to the Roger Ebert review where he says it's immensely appealing that this is a sacrifice for a higher purpose. I get that. And I'm sure, that's there too. And there are people who want that in there. To me, that's irrelevant. And the greater story, again, is Rick Blaine rediscovering his own best self. And we see that. We see that in Ayn Rand. We see how many love triangles are there in Ayn Rand where somebody says, Hank Rearden says, I can see that you belong with John Galt. Irene says that I can see that Henry belongs with this other woman. In The Red Pawn, the commandant says, Joan Harding, you need to go back to the United States with your husband.
And actually, I have a line from Atlas Shrugged that really reminds me that last scene, but I'll keep it for later. So, Amy, okay, we discussed about Rick. Do you think that Ilsa is doing a sacrifice?
Ilsa is kind of hard to read. Well, this is the thing, is that she already kind of made her sacrifice. And I think that it kind of, when she left Rick and she found out that Victor was still alive, that scene where she's they're basically in the cafe and they're drinking and he's like, the Germans are coming to occupy us. They're just a ways away. How about you and I get on a train and the conductor of the train can marry us? And then she looks away and you see that she's so good at that faraway look and that looking down, and you can just see exactly what she's thinking, that this isn't going to actually work. And then she just starts crying, and it's very, very sad. But as far as her making a sacrifice, I think that she was in love with both men. Although you could see more evidence that she was more in love with Rick, because it basically, the movie shows you with Victor, you see that she cares for him and she hero worships him, but she doesn't quite have that same sort of joyous passion she has with Rick. But by that time, when everything is said and done and she's in Casablanca now, Rick, I got to ask myself, does Rick want this relationship with her? I mean, she broke his heart terribly. She left a note. She couldn't say anything. We don't know how much she knew about Rick's past as a freedom fighter. Maybe if she did, maybe she would be able to confide in him that Victor actually was alive, and now she has to go back.
It's a similar answer to the question, why doesn't Dagny go back to Francisco? Because he broke her heart. But she finds out he had a reason. Yes, and her heart is still broken, and those years are all still lost. You can't rewind that. Yeah,
it's hard to rewind that. So yeah, I think that for Elsa, I think that that's a very difficult question to ask. Did she sacrifice?
If it was easy, the movie wouldn't be as good.
Right.
Okay, so here's how I view it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way in which you say a romance cannot survive in this crazy world. You cannot live your best life while the Second World War goes on. And okay, people, so here's the actual ending of Casablanca if it was real life, how I think it. The Allies win the Second World War. Victor Laszlo plays a central role. And when the war is over, Ilsa tells him, okay, I admire you so much, but I have to go back to him, and everyone is happy. But I mean this.
I'm only laughing because I said the same thing last night. Amy and I had the conversation.
But it makes sense. It makes sense at that time to say, yes, it does make sense to leave Rick because there's a priority which is different. I mean, I was think about this. Let's say we have a very bad, an even more tragic pandemic, a pandemic where even if we do the most rational thing, vaccines come out very quickly, the world is in jeopardy. It would make sense to say, first, we need to beat this for life, for me to be able to pursue my values. So it would be able to say, okay, the most important thing is that we win that war. So for some reason, that's what came to my mind. But you mentioned Dagny and Francisco. There's a nice scene, obviously, or every scene is a nice scene, but At the end, they have this heartbreaking dialogue by the airplane, and she says, "I'd never leave you." And Rick says, "And you never will." And what does he mean by that?
Yes.
Let's go to Atlas. It's the scene where we're in Atlantis. Yeah. By the way, major spoiler alert, people. If you haven't read Atlas, now's the time to put the volume down. So Francisco reveals his secret to Dagny. And Dagny says, "Francisco, I did love you." And she understands she still loves him, but she's in love with someone else. And Francisco, magnanimously, the largesse, he says, "But you do. You still love me. Even if there's one expression of it that you'll always feel and want, but will not give me any longer. I'm still what I was, and you'll always see it, and you'll always grant me the same response, even if there's a greater one that you'll grant to another man. No matter what you feel for him, it will not change what you feel for me. And it won't be treason to either, because it comes from the same root. It's the same payment in answer to the same values. This is what I'm seeing also with Rick, and also the self-confidence of that man. Again, if you haven't got self-esteem, you cannot be a Rick. What does he do, which is the most brilliant thing? He goes to Laszlo and he lies. "This woman is in love with you. She came to," technically he doesn't lie. "He came to me yesterday trying to persuade me that she's in love with me to get the tickets. But I know that she's only in love with you." So for me, that's even more of a largesse and a kind of I would say it's selfish to be this largesse, because you're like, I'm such a cool guy. I did this. I did what I had to do. And I'll finish with a story that I've said in the past many times. I once asked Andrew Bernstein why, because the most iconic scene perhaps in Casablanca is not even when the plane leaves. It's when the police, the captain of the police and Rick walk towards the...
Yes.
And he says, "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Right. And there's this scene where they see the airplane with this stoicism, and it's so brilliant. Anyway, so the question is, how does Rick, he doesn't start crying. He walks proudly. And I asked Andrew Bernstein, how does Rick do that? And I asked him also, how does Hank Rearden, when he loses Dagny, how does he keep this? And he says, because they know who they are. They're giants. Hank Rearden knows he's a giant. Rick knows he's a giant. Okay, not as Hank, but he knows he's worth it. He knows he's got it. So it's like, okay, I lost the love of my life, but I'm still the person I am. I can still be proud. I can still be optimist in life. And again, postscript, I think he's going to get Ilsa at the end. So the world is over.
To quote the philosopher Thor, because that's what heroes do. And heroes don't do that because that's what heroes do. That's what heroes are. And that's what these men are. Yeah, Rick sees something larger than, as large and as amazing as the love story is. Casablanca isn't a love story, or isn't just a love story.
Yeah, it's redemption.
It's a redemption, a self-reclamation story.
Yes, it is.
Incidentally, if you've seen the film This Land Is Mine, which Yaron Brook keeps saying is his favorite film or one of his favorite films, if you've seen the film, minor spoiler alert for that one, this is another story where the protagonist, throughout this story, which appears to have a love story that's significant, the protagonist reclaims his dignity. And in the process, he woos the girl successfully, but he doesn't get the girl in the end. If you haven't seen This Land Is Mine, that's worth seeing just for the connection there. It's enormously heartening, even though I would have to describe it as a triumphant tragedy.
But also, people, life is a process. You might not get the girl today. If you're a Rick, if you're someone of moral stat, if you're a moral paragon and a hero, you're gonna get here maybe down the way.
That's right. Francisco d'Anconia won't be alone. Francisco d'Anconia is not going to stay alone.
Yeah.
Hank Rearden is not going to stay alone. The problem with Atlas Shrugged is people read it and think Dagny Taggart's the only good woman in the world. because that's, you see a little of Kay Ludlow, you see a little bit of the Fishwife, a
Well,
little
Kay
bit.
Ludlow is taken. Come on, who's gonna take her away from Ragnar?
Every other good woman in the world is taken. Well, okay, come on.
No, it's going to happen for
Dagny
Hank
Taggart,
and Frank.
she might be the best woman in the world, but the only good woman in the world? No, these boys are not going to be alone.
And also, your antagonist is not John Gold, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, Ayn Rand said she couldn't write a series of mysteries because the answer is always obvious. She never gives the main action to an antagonist. It's always protagonist versus protagonist. It's always the heroes versus the heroes.
Yeah, that's good.
So can I get back to Rick here? And what he gets out of it. What does Rick get out of it? Not only does he not sacrifice, in my opinion, he gets a lot out of this. He gets to see who he was again in Paris. He gets to experience himself as the same man who was in Paris. He gets to experience himself as the freedom fighter, as the one who is heroic, as the one who is a man of action, who of moral certainty, a man of moral certainty. He regains his moral certitude. And he gets a lot of this, I think, from seeing Elsa with Laszlo. I think that not only does he get to see himself and experience himself as a fun-loving guy in Paris who is enjoying his time with Elsa, but he sees that he is bigger than Cafe American in Casablanca. He is a bigger man. He will be able to, and he now has the strength. He realizes he has the strength to go forward with Renault, become freedom fighters off into some other city, and leave Casablanca and hide out and do all the dangerous things. He has got that emotional fuel, not just from Ilsa, but from Laszlo. I think he gets a reclamation of his best self. And that's
what a brilliant comment is what you made about Rick and himself in Paris, because if you think about it, you can think of yourself of a love of the past, and quite often you don't really miss the person, the other person. You miss who you were when you were at your best, when you were so in love, when life was so full of promise and when life was so full of potential. So you're right. Rick not only discovers Ilsa, he basically discovers himself in Paris. And that's another reading of the famous line, "We'll always have Paris." It's not only we'll always have this, what we experience in Paris. We see them in Paris in like a 3-minute segment, but they're so not entirely carefree because the war is going on, but they're so happy. They're so alive. That's the word. That's the term. They're so alive. So I think what you said is something that I missed, but something which is definitely the case, Amy. So that's a great point. Have we got any last super chats, or shall I do the outro?
We do. We have a peculiar one from Phil, who doesn't seem to be a Bogart fan, but I'm going to read it as written because he gave a generous £10, which is certainly more than $10. As someone who, for obvious reasons, has been in love with Lauren Bacall for the past 40 years or so, do you think she would have been as interesting in the role opposite Humpty Go-Kart?
Ooh, okay.
That's kind of rude to Mr. Bogart there, but okay.
So Bogart fell in love, I think, with Lauren Bacall in a film set.
Yeah.
So, okay, Lauren Bacall is also, you could also see her as a woman who would change one's man's life and make him forget. But here's the thing. It's impossible for me to imagine anyone as Ilsa rather than Ingrid. It's impossible. It's impossible. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Lauren Bacall. I would say Lauren Bacall is more of an impressive woman than Bergman, like if you see her in the supermarket. But I cannot imagine anyone else playing Ilsa. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you think she would have been as interesting? I have no idea. It blows the mind to think of somebody else in that role. I'm sure the answer to the question is yes, but yeah, I can't make that real to myself.
Do you know who Lauren Bacall would be great for? Dominique in The Fountainhead. And I
Yes.
think someone thought about, I don't think I'm the first one who comes up with this idea, but she was made to play Dominique.
Yeah, Patricia Neal was good, but she was not ideal for that role.
She was good, yeah, but Lorraine Bacall, I think, would be better, yeah.
So Mary Aline comes in with another $1.99. Thank you for that.
Thank you,
with the
Aline.
heart and M&Ms, because I think she knows that we're on a super low carb right now. So that's, I love the heart. The M&Ms are making me want lunch. Christopher Smith comes in with Canadian $2.79, which $2.79, I'm guessing that's probably, equal to $2.50 or $2 American. There's got to be a reason for the 79 there. But either way, he name checks the film and says, here's looking at you guys, which, that's an awfully sweet thing for you to say to us because, if you've seen the film.
Yeah, can I go back to Phil real quick? Is that he makes fun of Humphrey Bogart's name, and okay. So we were watching this film together, Robert and I, and I said, "Oh my gosh, Robert, it's Grandpa Rick."
He's so old. So old. Well, you get used to that in those old films where these named stars always had these young ingenue actresses.
So it's Uncle Rick with his niece.
It's an age difference, like you see in Objectivism. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, a substantial age difference
Hollywood,
there.
Or Hollywood.
Or Hollywood Objectivism, same thing.
But anyway, I just want to shout out to Phil for
and if you're going to make fun of Humphrey Bogart's name, you've got to give the man props.
Yeah.
For not changing his name. If your name was Bogart, would you have not taken a stage name?
Okay, as a Greek, I don't get the joke. Why is the name funny?
Oh, well, a Bogart is, in certain cultures, that's the same as a booger.
Or it also is like a spirit or a demon.
Yeah, like a boggart.
Yeah.
But either way, it's not an attractive word.
No.
In English, it just sounds like an unattractive word. Bogart. That's so bogus. It's so bogus. Anyway, I wouldn't pick on Humpty Bogart. I'm sorry, Humphrey Bogart's Grandpa Rick's name if he had the stones, the cojones to keep his original name and not go for Cary Grant or something.
Yes,
very rolls very off the tongue.
And speaking of that, I just want to say that we did some research last night, and I know Nikos, you were talking about the German, the German
co-stars.
Officers singing, and then Laszlo encouraging the band to play La Marseillaise. But yeah, we were talking about the co-stars or the extras within that room of Cafe Americain. What did you find out?
So many of those roles were played by expatriates, and especially German and Hungarian actors who had come to America for exactly those kinds of reasons. Some of them earlier and after World War I, but it's been said, and I believe it, that part of the reason for the emotional resonance of that scene isn't just that they staged this scene the way they did, but that the actors really felt it because so many
see the tears
had lived that.
When I was seeing that scene, I was thinking, have to say, I was in a complete, everything was so much better in the past mood because everyone was looking so good, the clothes, the aesthetics. But anyway, when I was watching that film, I was thinking, would anyone today sing the national anthem and see such a meaning in any national anthem?
Yes.
So today we say, the national anthem is racist. Are you going to kneel and do the BLM or not? But it meant something. Even that woman, what's her name? Yvonne, the girl who we understand that Rick had the ex-girlfriend. Notice, by the way, how she resembles. I mean, she resembles somehow Ilsa. So for me, it's very clear that Rick only tried to find something that reminds him of Ilsa. Even she's in tears. So she's not a personality of status, of moral stature. I keep confusing stature with status. Anyway, she shows up with someone. I think it was a German even to make Rick jealous. But even she gets so passionate with the French national anthem. So,
yes. Yeah, she couldn't have been horrible and superficial, or Rick wouldn't have been with her.
Right. Yeah. Can I read some of the English translation of La Marseillaise?
Sure.
Let's go, children of the fatherland. The day of glory has arrived. Against us, tyranny's bloody flag is raised. In the countryside, do you hear the roaring of these fierce soldiers? They come right to our arms to slit the throats of our sons and our friends. Grab your weapons, citizens, form your battalions, let us march. May impure blood water our fields. That's a little bit different than "Oh, say can you see." There's even more. There's even more of this. This horde of slaves, traitors, plotting kings, what do they want? For whom these vile shackles, these long prepared irons? Frenchmen for us, oh, what an insult, what emotions that must excite. It is us that they dare to consider returning to ancient slavery.
Holy smoke.
What
so
these, yeah, and it
really, goes on. There's 4 or 5
really
verses.
Some moral fire in that song.
That's a war theme.
It is
far more than even.
And remember that Ayn Rand even admitted how powerful the Internationale was, which in the early days was the anthem of Soviet Union, before the actual anthem, which is also super powerful. So you don't have to agree with a regime to understand that quite often the national anthem is out of context, a super heroic, and that's the whole point of a good national anthem. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this was one of the longest episodes, but I think it was definitely worth it. And
we have one more super chat.
Let's go.
What do we got?
$4.99 from Enric. Thank you so much, Enric. He says, one of my favorite lines is when Captain Renault asks Rick why he came to Casablanca. Rick replies, my health, I came to Casablanca for the waters.
Well, Renault answered to him, Casablanca's in a desert. And Rick says, I was misinformed. And it's just, it's even Ebert points out, here, I'll go back to his article real quick. The opening scenes dance with comedy. The dialogue combines the cynical with the weary, wisecracks with epigrams. We see that Rick moves easily in a corrupt world. And
the witty lines, particularly by Louis, the French, the officer, the witty lines are great. He's back and forth with Rick.
Somehow, I don't even know how Claude Rains plays that role that you kind of like him, even though he's a despicable character. And by the end of the film, you kind of believe, yeah, he's finally ready to give up that and go off with Rick. And I'm sure Rick still won't trust him, longer than he can turn around. But he's willing to, he's just sick of being the corrupt police chief.
And he throws the VC bottle, which is symbolic.
Yeah, and he has the chance to turn Rick in. And instead of, Rick is the guy who shot him, he says, round up the usual suspects again.
Right. Oh, yeah, another iconic line. Okay, so people, tomorrow, something important. If you are in London or anywhere around, Yaron Brook returns to face-to-face events. I'm also going to be there. We're going to be with Inaya from the Free Speech Union, and we're going to have a panel, the topic being tribalism in politics. So it's on David Games College at 3:00. Come and say hi. We can have a coffee. We can have a chat. There's going to be a sale of my tribalist book in a very good discount, and it's going to be good to catch up with Yaron, and it's going to be nice.
That's amazing. And we normally didn't think of it, but we should have stopped to say, hey, how is that possible? And the answer is the Ayn Rand Center UK makes these things happen, in this case, in conjunction with ARI. But if you're not already a member of Ayn Rand Center UK, go to aynrandcenter.co.uk. And this is your chance. This is your chance to become a member for as little as £10 a month.
Become a member. And also the other thing you can do is you can go to the shop of the Ayn Rand Center UK and buy some merchandise. There are some mugs, laptop covers, some t-shirts, some of them with the logo, other a bit more on the funny side with some of the protagonists that we didn't create them, but they're kind of fun. So yeah, check out the shop, and we hope we'll see you tomorrow in London, 3:00 at David Games College. It's in a central location, and it's gonna be good fun. So Robert and Amy, thank you so much. That was the longest, perhaps, daily objective I've done, but it was for a reason. We could talk about this film for another hour, and it was a pleasure.
Outstanding. It's been great, Nikos. Do we have a clubhouse going after this one?
10, 15 minutes. Yeah, let's go there for a short chat. Let's see what Casablanca means to our listeners, whether they had something, whether they saw something in the film that we didn't, and we can catch up there. So
outstanding.
There,
well, this was
all the best.
Outstanding discussion. Thank you for that, Nikos. Again, one of my favorite films. I'm not surprised to hear that it's your favorite film. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was a great discussion. Let's talk some more on Clubhouse, and we'll see you on the next of the Daily Objective.
Bye-bye.
See you there.